Good morning, you're watching Morning at NTV. I did tell you that 85% of the 12.4% of our population, which is the people with disabilities, are not employed. It means you and I are not making an effort to open the spaces and these conversations for them. And why is that? And just earlier on, a few minutes ago, my colleague Andrew Chamagura was in Chirika talking to PWDs, actually asking them, this budget, do you feel favored? Let's talk not just budget, service delivery. Do you feel that you are included? And the saying, far from included, far from understood, far from remembered. Join me in studios, and I'm excited about this conversation from the National Union for Women with Disabilities here in Uganda. From that's Nwodu, Betty Cheptoyek. Good morning. Good morning. I told you I'm very excited to have this conversation because maybe I'll explain my background of why this is interesting to me. Last year, I had an opportunity to work with, and by then it was just a documentary, with children with disabilities in Mukono, and there were nuns, but sister, who had come together and done a school to educate, you know, because they were saying that the schools are not inclusive. They don't know how to handle children with whatever disability, and disabilities is different from what maybe you and I can see. They're deeper than that. And so children in Mukono were being thrown away because father could not handle it. The father was sidelining the woman was that day, and so they were throwing them. So these sisters came together and did a school, and when I went there, I was touched. I was touched. I have a brother-in-law who has a disability, and we've gone through years of, you know, helping him fit into society and supporting him in different ways. So for me, I know what this is on a personal level and also on a career level. So this is a great conversation for me to have, because I don't think many of us remember to have this conversation. We sideline people with disabilities a lot. So first, for my viewers to understand, Betty, tell us about you.
Good morning, viewers. My name is Betty Cheptoyek. I work with the National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda, and as a program officer coordinating a youth with disabilities project. And in Nwodu, National Union of Women with Disabilities, I am a board member representing the young women with disabilities on the board of directors, as well as the chairperson of human resource, or the chairperson personnel of the same organization. I am a woman with disability, young woman with disability, physically handicapped. I am from Kapchora in the eastern part of Uganda, and you know what it means to come from that mountainous part of the country when you have a disability.
Talk to us about that. You were just telling me off air that even from the family level, that the discrimination starts there.
Exactly.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, many times, and being a person or an advocate of persons with disabilities, and specifically the young people with disabilities, there are a number of issues that we face, which begin even at family level, where, you know, some parents who will not look at the potential that is in you, or a child with disability, will always look at the physical abilities. Like personally, I have a long story to share if I had only the time. But I think the parents contribute a lot towards their children with disabilities. And then other stakeholders like government, like development partners come in to support. But the biggest part and the foundation starts from home. Because when a parent produces 5 children, and out of those children, one has a disability, priority will always be given to the other ones who have no disabilities. For you go to school, for you cannot manage to go to school because you are unable to move. They look at the burden before looking actually at the
ability.
Exactly, the abilities and even the future of this person. And this puts us down. This puts the child with disability down right from the family to that outside exposure amongst the community.
You know, Betty, when I was talking to some of the parents of these children, they were crying, especially I didn't see a father, which is very telling, by the way. But there were only the mothers who had come, and the mothers were saying that, and just like you said, out of 5 children, this is my child with a disability. The others are okay. So the entire community, my in-laws told me, Bakuloga, this and this and this, you have brought a curse to the family, and that's why I felt the need to, you know,
they will also look at that child to be for the mother, because the mere fact that she has a disability or he has a disability, it's a responsibility of the mother.
Yeah,
but to me it was a different case in my family.
What was your case?
My case was like, you know, I think I'm the firstborn of 6 children, and I happened to have the disability at the age of 7 months. I got polio and it paralyzed my lower limbs. So I crawled for 14 years. But with the support of my parents, despite their humble background, they were able to give me priority amongst all the children.
Wow.
In the whole family, I graduated. In the whole family, I was given that education. Though what they would do was, because schools are very far from, the school was very far from home. So I started school at around 8 years. But my dad would carry me on his back to the school about 8 to 9 kilometers every day. Then if my dad took me in the morning, my mother comes to pick me in the evening on her back. Then my brother who follows me would go run home at around midday. He was allowed from school to run home at midday and make sure he brings for me lunch at 1:30 so that we are able to go to class at 2 p.m. And for me, one most interesting thing is I studied in inclusive schools throughout my life. I was always
tell us about what that means, inclusive schools versus ones that are not.
Inclusive schools are where the rest of the children without disabilities study from. And maybe you are 1 or 2. And for me, in all the schools I went to, over 500 students or pupils, I was the only person with disability. And that one also has a hell of experience, because these are people who do not understand disability in diversity. These are people who do not know how to handle.
What about even the teachers, not just the students?
The teachers, the teachers, the administrators, and everybody around the schools. And that was sometime from between 1993 up to even 2008. I had a lot of challenges related to school, but it was also a big learning point for me, because then, one, I had to create awareness even at that level before I could, with my peers and even the school administration. First of all, the inaccessibility itself. I was crawling. You know, when you're crawling and you're in uniform, you get so dirty. The rest of the pupils don't want to sit with you. They don't want you to touch on their books. They think you are dirty. They think you are an outcast. That's what I can say. But I think slowly by slowly, as time went on, despite the challenges, it also built my strength to love education and to also educate these people that that's not who I am. And why I say that is because I feel very proud, despite all the challenges that I went through going to school, and then even when I'm in school, I still had to persevere. And that's why I was able to even reach university, and I'm now working. I'm happy. But those who had to be tormented because of the nature of, you know, sarcastic words, the bullying. You know, they tell you, look at this one. When you go to play during break time, they don't, what can you manage? You move away. You can't do anything. So at the end of the day, and for me, I was very naughty. I think that's one thing that really empowered me, because I was naughty. They chased me from here. I go to another group. I want to jump this skipping rope, even when I couldn't manage.
And especially as we're going to really commend your parents, and we'll ask how that helped the community. But do you think also your parents' acceptance, and I use this very lightly, but acceptance of you and putting you and including you as a normal child, did that help also push you every day? It
is one thing that really pushed me, because if I had gone to a special school, in a special school they will always treat you as a special child.
Different.
It is very different, exactly. So you will not have that exposure to learn the different social behaviors of everybody, because all of you are at the same level, and you are confined in the same place. But having that different experience,
you're pushed to see life.
Helped me to pull
and we're talking about inclusiveness of people with disabilities in our communities, in our homes, our schools, our places of work, and it should it be equal opportunities though, Betty?
Yeah, we like currently as Nuodu, as Nudipu, we are advocating for equalization of opportunities. If we can be able to participate equally with the rest of the society, it's the way to go. We don't want to have everything that is special for us, because when the services are brought on board, they are not special. They are supposed to be for everybody. When it comes to employment, now we have graduates with disabilities, but they are not able to acquire jobs, because of the physical, the attitude that
not
the community, not the skills, not having the potential. I mean, we have the potential, but someone like you may not be able to understand that Betty has a potential, because if you looked at me coming from that door with my crutches and my bag, you'll only look at now, what can this girl do? Can she even carry a laptop from one room to another? But if you gave me the space to work in your organization, you'll understand the capabilities that
and I measure you by your results,
exactly.
not measure you by your ability.
And the research has already done it. We have a project on employment of persons with disabilities,
which has efficiency.
Yes, the persons with disabilities, with the different companies and agencies that they have worked, have very good results. No one regrets about them.
Yeah, so let's talk about first the community before we get into the workplace. The community, I know your parents must have had also a hard time explaining to the community where they lived.
Definitely.
Betty is one of us.
Definitely.
Did that change their mindset? And also working with Nuwodu, seeing communities change their mindsets. What have you experienced?
Like on my parents' side, they did a lot of, they did a lot of it towards me, because they loved me and they knew I am their daughter and I'm their burden. But talking about the community around my family, they were always reminded more often than they would want to hear that how do you keep such a child with a disability? She's a beautiful girl, but I mean, how will you manage handling this girl? But I can assure you, Flavia, I am even independent and supporting my family more than the rest of my siblings. And when it comes to the communities where we are working, as Nuwodu, as Nudipo, because we are doing a lot of advocacy all over the country for persons with disabilities, for women with disabilities, for youth with disabilities, there is still a level of the same discrimination, attitude, negative attitude, and then the whole thing of people with disabilities failing to move, which even limits them more, because if they are locked up in a house, you are staying in the same environment every day from January to December, from Monday to Friday. You cannot even get exposed to know that there is someone called Flavia in NTV, because you have no access to even move to a recreational center and watch a television and see these role models. You cannot even be able to understand that I have a skill in me because of how your family looks at you. And when it comes to, if the family is not able to empower you, then how much do you expect from the community? Because if they don't have the awareness that your family exposes you to them, or you don't have an assistive device to move from home to a recreation center, it becomes a big limitation to many persons with disabilities, because then they lose the whole concept of education. They don't understand that even going to school would help me. They may wish to go.
See the world better.
See the world better,
yes,
exactly.
Yes. Let me ask you about cost. I'm asking cost in this way because you've told me some of them are not able to leave because of assisted devices, which are also not cheap.
They are not cheap.
They're
at
not
all.
cheap
like
at all.
I can give you
rehabilitation to some of them is also not cheap.
Exactly.
So what happens there?
So when the challenge of not being rehabilitated, or if you're not supposed to be rehabilitated, like you need to have a wheelchair and you can't afford a wheelchair, it is a big problem.
Your family, which already, as you said, is seeing you is not going to invest in that.
Is not going to invest in that. But if the family also gets, is able to support you, but how much can they be able to support you? Because if a wheelchair costs about 500,000 and the family income is very low, below 2,000, a dollar, then it becomes really very difficult for the family to prioritize a wheelchair or a crutch that I use to actually
move you from one place to
another place. So this one becomes a limitation itself, because we have affirmative action for persons with disabilities who have got 2 principal passes, and Nudipo does the recommendation for these young people to join university. But how many are able to even get that information? Or how many are even able to make it to senior 5 or senior 6 so that they can be able to acquire those 2 principal passes? So there are a lot of limitations here and there, and then the lack of that support by the will, by the community, by the family to see you move to higher higher levels.
So let's talk about inclusiveness in, yes, university now, that's the school, then eventually to the workplace.
Workplace, exactly.
As you've said in the beginning, when it comes to inclusiveness of persons with disabilities, we're talking equal opportunity. When Betty puts her CV and Flavia puts her CV, you should consider us on that.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
On merit, yes.
Yes. Then there was a concern.
Like you're calling for interviews, you've shortlisted us. Then when we come for the interviews, the first impression you'll get is when you see me and Flavia, you look at the disability in me, but not looking at the potential that is in me.
Let me ask you, apart from the fact that there's discrimination, why do you think 85% of people with disabilities are not employed? Why do you think companies are running away or shying away from actually employing people with disabilities? Because you can't tell me they're not skilled or experienced or smart enough to fill these positions. They obviously are.
They are, yeah.
They're going to school, they're educated, they're well trained. So why are companies not able to include them, if we can use that?
One of them is, first and foremost, I remember the government gave us 15%. I mean, levied companies 15%. I mean, waived companies 15% if they employ persons with disabilities. But I think one of the challenges is when a person is visually impaired, they need to use a Parkins braille, which is about 3 million plus, to be able to effectively, deliver. They need to have, if a person is deaf, they need a sign language interpreter in the workplace to be able to communicate and equally participate with the rest of the team. So to a large extent, most companies fear the other extra cost.
When you want to talk about inclusion, there's a cost to also be inclusive.
Exactly.
Because also, I was telling my colleagues, even the infrastructure needs to change.
When
Betty was coming to see me, she said, I'm in the parking lot, and I came to her. And I looked at the stairs and I said, Betty, there's a ramp.
The other side,
but
exactly.
Many companies don't have that. They don't have that luxury of having a ramp for so they consider all that. We'd have to change the infrastructure and that cost.
That is true. Yeah. Yes. And then also inside the office itself, how accessible is it to a person who uses a wheelchair? Are you able to maneuver in every office comfortably, easily? So there are so many factors around why the employers are not able to give us. And then now the other bit of it is the attitude that this person may not be able to give the best to the company.
Betty, I'm going to talk about women. We're both women sitting here, and I would like, of course, between you and I believe we're on the same equal platform.
That is
We're
true.
playing equally. I heard someone say a comment the other day, said, this Flavia, she's efficient, but you see when she gets pregnant, you wait. Which is sad to say, because being pregnant is not a disease.
No.
It's a blessing, it's a miracle. And if I'm having complications today with my colleagues, convincing them and putting their mindset out of the fact that I can't be efficient, so that, should I get to that point when I'm going to be, childbearing, do you face such problems? Because we're talking about sexual and reproductive health rights, a right to choose when and how many children to have. But let's talk about even the mindset of people looking at you, choosing to be a wife and a mother.
Now, that one also has a whole lot around it.
Yeah.
Because first and foremost, when they look at you as a woman with disability, they may see you pregnant, like you have said. The first thing they will say, and they've said
that many times.
Yet they forget that this young girl or a woman with disability has a right like any other person without a disability. Because when I have sex, it should be sex by choice, not by chance. In what we have a project called sex by choice, not by chance. Oftentimes, because of the attitude that the community, the society has towards us, because if I have a boyfriend and I've chosen to have a child, I know this child has accepted to be with me. Why would you then again say, this man is wrong, he shouldn't have done this? Because I have a right, I have even high feelings than you without a disability. And I can assure you, women with disabilities, it's confirmed with the research that NWODU has done, that they are even better performance than you, women without disabilities.
I'll leave that research to Betty.
And why am I saying this? is because sometimes we are limited. When you go to hospital, you're pregnant and you need to access these services.
When our colleague was actually on the ground, a woman mentioned that and said, these hospitals, you know, they ask you to get onto this bed.
Exactly.
You are, you know, you're impaired, you can't get on the bed.
Now
They're
you
not
get a bed which
enough.
is, you know, the bed
This
is
high.
this high, and then for you crawling down, they will ask you, climb the bed the way you got that pregnancy. And then many of the women with disabilities at the end of the way shy to even access this SRHR. When it comes to the deaf, it's even worse, because if the service providers, the medical personnel do not understand even basic sign language, it becomes hard.
Yeah.
Leave alone the pregnancy part. What about the whole aspect of you know, checking, testing, HIV and so on? Women with disabilities, like the women with albinism, are always being used because they think there's that mentality that when a person has albinism and you have HIV, it is the person with albinism to cure the HIV.
Oh no, so for clinical research? So
no, it's not like clinical. I think it's a belief, it's a misconception, it's a myth that when you sleep with a woman with albinism or a man, then you'll have to, the HIV will have to die off. So
they're taking advantage
They take advantage of them. Then when it comes to, for example, a blind person, you want to go for a medical examination, maybe you have HIV or something, or you want to test to check, you don't want to be with your guide. But sometimes you are forced by circumstances to move with someone, so that privacy bit of it is not really there.
Yes, I hear
so there are a lot of issues around sex reproductive health that I really think we need to even discuss more about them. When you look at a girl who is intellectually disabled, sometimes they are taken advantage of, sometimes even by family members or relatives, or even the community around them, because they cannot communicate, they cannot express themselves, but they are locked up in one place. Someone waits for the family to go away, and then they can take advantage of them. When they conceive, it is a problem, it's a burden to the family, because this person cannot take care of themselves.
You know, today we're talking about inclusiveness, and as we wind up, perhaps, Betty, what you can tell the viewer to what they can do from even their position as an individual to foster inclusiveness of people with disabilities.
Thank you very much, Flavia. What I can tell the viewers is, as a community, as community development workers, as people who are working towards the rights of everybody, as government, let us be in position to support our families, our friends with disabilities. Let us push them, encourage them to go to school. Let us support them to get employment. Let us build that esteem in them. Let us build the confidence in them. When we accept ourselves, because we are accepted by everybody, the sky becomes the limit. When it comes to budget allocations by government, let's have a provision really for, if it is a women fund, how are women with disabilities included? How are the youth with disabilities included? How are the persons with disabilities included? Because at the end of the day, we need to be at the same level. But how do we get to the same level if we are not included in all these programs? Let us employ persons with disabilities. Women with disabilities, when it comes to accessing services, are the ramps available? Are these services that can enable me move without having any challenges, without asking someone to come and support me everywhere I would want to go? I want to go and meet a doctor. Can I be able to access that doctor without necessarily, asking someone to guide me to that doctor? Let the medical people also try to get some basics at different levels in sign language,
training,
to handle mobility rehabilitation, to handle these different categories of disabilities.
It makes sense. What I've heard from you, I think the biggest takeout, Betty, is that this inclusiveness is a discussion for everyone.
That is
and at
true.
every level. My brother, my sister, my aunt, everyone who comes in contact with a person with disability. And I think I should also note as we wind up that you think that because Betty has said hers was at the age of what, 7?
I got it at the age of 7 months.
7 months.
Yes.
That, maybe that's, okay, that's Betty, but I have people who I know, because of maybe diabetes, have had their legs amputated, because of an accident, have had, so a disability can come at
anytime and to
anyone.
That is
so. You know, it's our role and responsibility to actually make sure that inclusiveness happens. Not just support in case it happens to you, but also for people around you, you know, because now Betty is my friend now. So, you know, I must also know how to also help her and also include her. Remember, it's 12.4%, sorry?
I wanted to just add that, for example, many times people think that when you put a ramp, it's for persons with disabilities. I have heard, though I have not accessed the Parliament ramp, everyone tells us that the ramp in Parliament is the best, I think, in the whole country. But you find that it is more used by people without disabilities
than people with disabilities.
And if we have that inclusive kind of mindset, even in our families, when you are building your house, you may not have anyone with a disability, but think about the accessibility itself, because at some point you will grow old, or you'll have a grandmother
and you're tired,
you need it. So you can't dismantle your house to have a ramp later. You need to just have a plan.
Thank you so much, Betty Cheptoi from Nuwodu. It's been our discussion on inclusiveness of people with disabilities. You're watching Morning at NTV.
Thank you.